let's talk about that bit of a blindside from the central bank. They came out, they cut rates. Most of the market weren't that ready for it. My question to you is, were you surprised? Do you think this is the beginning of a new run to the downside in terms of rates from the central bank?
I personally wasn't surprised. Some of my people were, but you've got a weak economy, you've got inflation within the range, and you know, I think the economy needs a little bit of help, and that's why I think the governor was correct to cut rates. It could be, you could get 1 or 2 more rate cuts, as long as inflation remains moderate or within the range, and the rand remains within its range.
You talk about South Africa there. Obviously, it's key. More than 50% of your business comes from from that part of the world. How are you diversifying risk? We'll talk about the politics. We'll talk about the business environment. Things are slowing down. Tell me what you're doing and what you're seeing on the ground there in terms of South Africa and the economy and the business community.
So I think that we're still seeing a reasonable level of activity for our business, but we know that retailers have seen a big drop-off in their revenues. Confidence is not that great. So you know, we're used to volatile. We come out of we grew up in an emerging market. These markets can be volatile at times. So we're used to the volatility. We're always cautious on credit, and we always stay long liquidity. So and we deal with a specific target client base that's normally a little bit better off than the average. So you know, we're not seeing a lot of stress at this point in time, but clearly economic activity is weak.
Indeed, which takes me to the point of, if you're diversifying or looking to diversify, have you got an acquisition plan at all? Are you interested in buying anything more here or in Europe?
No, we're not acquiring anything at this point in time. No acquisition plans. We try and deal with the right type of clients, and that's our focus.
Okay, I think we've covered off that one quite squarely then. Let me return back then to the bigger issue, which is, I'm reading an article from Pravin Gordhan, the former minister, obviously, down there in South Africa, and he's saying it's time for Mr. Zuma to go, and he talks about democracy. I think the president should move aside and let somebody take over the country to reset the course so that we can fulfill the kind of aspiration that Mandela and his generation had for South Africa. That was Pravin Gordhan's words. Would you agree with that sentiment in terms of it's time for Zuma to go, to rehabilitate the economy, to rehabilitate the credit rating?
Look, I think, you know, Pravin Gordhan's a politician, and that's what, you know, for the politicians to deal with. You know, what I believe in is that we need to reorientate our economy towards a growth economy. We've got to build confidence. We have to fix up some of the issues around the structure of the economy. You can't grow an economy and create jobs unless you're business friendly, and those are the things that I would prefer to concentrate on. It's up to the politicians to choose who wants to lead them. They're elected officials, and we have a chance every 5 years to vote. So that's their job. But our job is to try and convince the politicians that are in power that their policies are incorrect, or their policies need to change or move more down the road of being business friendly, as opposed to the current policies that we see coming out of the current government.
Well, let's just talk about one of those policies, because it's specifically in regard, you and I started the conversation with the rate cut coming from the central bank, but of course there has been this move to change the mandate of the Reserve Bank of South Africa to a socio-economic well-being of its citizens rather than inflation. Your interpretation of that, do you have any words of wisdom or critique on that move?
Yeah, I think the individual who made those comments is not an economist, is not someone who should be dealing with that kind of matter. I think that we're quite happy with the current, as business people, we don't want inflation to get out of hand. We want to protect the currency as best as we possibly can. And clearly, therefore, the discipline that we've had from our central bank over many, many years has held the country in good stead. And we would think that that is the appropriate policy. The current policy of the central bank, using inflation targeting, protecting the value of the currency, recognizing at times there may be economic hardship and you can afford lower interest rates, particularly when they're not going to have an impact on inflation, is the right approach. So, you know, I wouldn't agree with that statement at all.
The consequence, of course, is...
There are other ways to uplift the economy. If we become business-friendly, we'll uplift the economy.
How do they become business-friendly? What's the biggest and most important policy that you would want to see that would convince you that politics is moving forward for the business agenda?
Okay, so I would think the most important thing for me at the moment would be, what are we going to do with the way state-owned enterprises are run? And how are we going to get them to be run on much more commercial grounds and that they do not become a burden on the state? So I think that would be step number one, is let's fix the structure of state-owned enterprise. If they're going to be government-owned, let's move towards a Singapore-type model where you have boards that decide on who the CEOs are, and the CEOs appoint their people to run the business. If they're no good, you remove them. So I think that would be, you know, first step. I think there are a whole lot of areas where South Africa can make a difference, like being head office for Africa, building our tourism sector and our service sectors. So we should have a much more pragmatic approach to allowing expats to come and work here, particularly when someone wants to locate a head office in South Africa, as opposed to difficulty that some people are having with Home Affairs at the moment in terms of getting visas for key expats that they want to locate to open up their offices. So there are many places in which we can become more business friendly. We have export zones that have been created. We're not using them at all. So we could take some of the jobs coming out of China, the low type skilled jobs, and not have too much burden of regulation over those businesses, so that they can compete effectively. There are all sorts of areas where we become more business friendly.
Those are the policies, as it were, from central banks. Stay with inflation targeting. That's your message to government, which brings me full circle then back to the credit downgrades.
And monetary discipline are important for us.
Those are the linchpins of any economy, but we've had credit downgrades on South Africa, and I suppose the question from where I sit within a markets perspective, as I look at the currency prism and I look at the bond prism, do you think Moody's will follow through with another downgrade, or when can South Africa emerge from its downgrade cycle?
Yeah, so I think the challenge for rating agencies at this point in time, because they still see that you've got monetary discipline, and they still see that there is fiscal discipline, so we need to continue to demonstrate that we have fiscal discipline and monetary discipline. The problem is the economy is not growing. So the challenge for us is now how to get the economy growing. So, you know, about 18 months ago, we created a CEO initiative where CEOs of top 100 companies created I wouldn't say a think tank, a number of different projects to help assist government in terms of getting the economy going. You know, those are taking time to get executed, and we need initiatives like that. That helps. But generally speaking, we need the policy framework to become a lot more business friendly. And there are lots of things in our country that are just not business friendly.
Stephen, let's just pivot to one other burning issue. Your business is in South Africa. You also have a very strong business presence here in the city of London and in the United Kingdom.
Yes.
I'm looking at what John Cryan said yesterday afternoon. Deutsche Bank are preparing for a hard Brexit. You see, this kind of thing just frightens the pants off me. We will assume a reasonable worst outcome rather than a worst case. But the worst is always likely to be worse than people can imagine. You see, that kind of line from a very significant CEO really does, I suppose, put fear in me. How fearful are you that passporting will disappear? Brexit, how are you beginning to prepare? Are you preparing for that kind of scenario?
Look, I mean, our bank is mainly a UK bank. Our wealth manager is mainly a UK wealth manager. Our asset management business is more global. It has capability to manage money. You know, its head office is between Cape Town and London, but its businesses are all over the world. So they're not really that affected by Brexit, unless, you know, the area where we could be affected by Brexit is in our bank. As I mentioned to you some time back, we have an Irish branch, and under Brexit we will no longer be able to have an Irish branch. We have to have a separately capitalised subsidiary. So that is the key effect. There may be some licenses that we need to apply for, but in essence, what we're more worried about is what is the knock-on effect on the UK economy if you have a hard Brexit, and what kind of shock to the UK economy will that generate. Obviously, at this point in time, the pound has taken most of the heat, and but in the medium term, I think a hard Brexit is going to be very difficult for the UK economy because it's going to affect a lot of, you get a lot of unknowns coming at you. So one needs to be reasonably defensive, mainly because of the economic impact of a hard Brexit. We're always hopeful that good sense prevails and that you don't go down that road because it's not good for anyone. But, we have to be defensive in terms of the way we conduct our business activity. Structurally, the only thing that we have to consider is, do we create a separate, apply for a banking license in Ireland? That's a call we still have to make.